The city was already sparkling with lights when he walked down the streets, but they felt cold to him. Store windows glimmered with decorations, and mannequins in red and green outfits seemed to smile at everyone but him. The air smelled like roasted chestnuts and cinnamon, and cheerful music floated from speakers, yet it could not touch him. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, trying to keep out the chill, but it was not just the cold air he felt. It was the weight of being alone in the middle of all the happiness. He had spent the last year carrying more loss than he thought he could bear. There had been moments when he tried to reach out, calling old friends, sending messages to family, but most of those calls went unanswered. Some friends were too busy with their own lives, and family lived too far away, scattered across different cities. Each unanswered message felt like a reminder that he did not belong anywhere, that maybe he never would. Christmas was supposed to be a time for connection, a time for warmth and laughter, but for him, it was shaping up to be a mirror reflecting all that he had lost as he walked past a small cafe. He watched families and friends laughing over steaming cups of coffee and slices of pie. Children tugged at their parents' hands, eager to show them something shiny or colorful. The scene would have made someone else smile, but he only felt hollow. He wondered if anyone even noticed him walking past, a solitary figure in a sea of joy. He felt invisible, like a ghost moving through a world that had forgotten he existed. He had a small apartment not far from the city center, a place that had once felt like home, but now it was just a quiet space filled with echoes of the past. He had tried to decorate a little for the season, putting up a small tree and some lights, but it felt empty without anyone to share it with. The thought of spending Christmas alone made his chest tighten. He imagined sitting in the quiet, the lights blinking softly, no one to talk to, no one to share a laugh, no one to hold. The idea of that lonely night made him ache. That evening, he wandered aimlessly through the city, passing street performers playing cheerful tunes on violins and saxophones. People tossed coins into the open cases, clapping and smiling. He stopped for a moment, listening to the music, but instead of feeling joy, he felt a deep, gnawing sadness. He wanted to clap, to throw in a coin, to be part of the crowd, but something held him back. He felt like he did not belong anywhere, like the music belonged to a world that would never include him. He thought back to previous Christmases, when life had felt lighter. There had been family gatherings, laughter, and even little disagreements that now seemed trivial. He missed those moments more than he wanted to admit. Each memory felt like a knife twisting in his heart. He had always thought Christmas was a happy time, a celebration of love and togetherness. But now it only reminded him of everything he had lost. The festive season, which was supposed to bring warmth, only brought him pain. Feeling tired and hollow, he decided to walk home. The streets were busy, people rushing from shop to shop, carrying bags filled with gifts. He passed a toy store, and the sight of children pressing their faces against the glass made his heart ache. One little girl pressed her nose to the window and pointed excitedly to a stuffed animal, her father crouching down to smile at her. He looked away quickly, not wanting anyone to see the tears that had formed in his eyes. It was strange how something so small could make him feel both the sting of loneliness and the longing for connection. By the time he reached his apartment, the sky had turned a deep, dark blue. He fumbled with his keys, finally pushing open the door to a silent space that smelled faintly of old wood and winter air. He put down his coat and took a seat on the couch, staring at the small tree in the corner. Its lights blinked softly, casting shadows across the room. He wanted to turn on some music, maybe even make a cup of cocoa. But even these small comforts felt meaningless without someone to share them with. He sat there for a long time, thinking about how he had ended up here, alone on Christmas Eve. The loneliness felt heavy, pressing down on his chest. He thought about calling someone, anyone, just to hear a voice. But each time he picked up his phone, doubt and fear made him put it down again. What if no one answered? What if he sounded pathetic? What if reaching out made him feel worse? The questions circled in his mind, each one a reminder that he was isolated as night fell. The city lights seemed to blur together, creating a soft glow outside his window. He stared at them, thinking about the warmth and happiness happening somewhere out there, somewhere he was not. He felt a strange mixture of longing and resignation, like he had accepted that this Christmas would be another quiet, painful night. He wondered how many people felt the same way he did, hidden behind smiles and decorations, carrying their own invisible burdens. He tried to distract himself by thinking about work, about tasks he needed to complete, but even that felt hollow. He was going through motions, moving like a machine, without any real connection to life. The thought that he had spent so much energy on things that now felt meaningless made him feel even emptier. Christmas, which was supposed to bring joy, had instead highlighted the emptiness he carried with him every day, in the quiet of his apartment. He finally allowed himself to cry. The tears were silent at first, but then they fell freely, soaking his cheeks and hands. He cried for the loneliness, for the memories of better times, for the unfulfilled hope that this Christmas might be different. The crying did not fix anything, but it felt like a small release. A recognition that he was still human, still capable of feeling deeply. After a while, he wiped his face and looked at the tree again. Its lights blinked steadily, indifferent to his pain. But in that small, flickering glow, he saw a tiny spark of something he could not quite name. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the stubbornness of life to keep shining even in the darkest moments. He did not know, but for the first time that evening he felt a faint pull toward the idea that things could change. He sat there, letting the city's distant sounds drift in through the window. Somewhere far away, people laughed and sang, celebrating with those they loved. Somewhere in that vast, crowded world, he existed too. And though he was alone tonight, he could still hope for a tomorrow that might be different. The thought was fragile, almost laughable, but it was enough to keep him from sinking completely. As he finally went to bed, he pulled the blanket around himself and stared at the ceiling, thinking about what Christmas had meant to him in the past and what it could still mean. He did not have answers, and he did not know what would happen in the morning. But for now, he held on to the small, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas could surprise him. That tiny spark, fragile as it was, felt like the first step away from the pain that had been weighing on him all year. The next morning, woke with a dull ache in his chest. His body felt heavy and cold, and every movement reminded him that something was off. He thought about trying to shake it off, to ignore it, as he often did, but the feeling persisted. His head was foggy, and a light cough made him wince. For a moment, he considered staying in bed all day. But then, he remembered his small stack of bills and the groceries he needed to pick up. He needed to face the day, even if it felt like a battle. The walk to the clinic was slow and quiet. Snow had fallen lightly overnight, leaving a soft white blanket over the streets. Footsteps crunched against it as he moved along, and the cold bit at his cheeks and hands. He had never liked winter much, but today it seemed especially cruel. Each breath came out in misty clouds, and he shivered despite his heavy coat. The city around him was waking up, and people hurried past, wrapped in scarves and hats, chatting and laughing as if the world had no space for someone like him. When he reached the clinic, he hesitated at the door. The sterile smell hit him immediately. The sound of hurried footsteps and clipped voices reminded him of all the times he had felt invisible. He had not been to a doctor in months, preferring to tough out illness on his own. But today, he knew he could not ignore it. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, where the receptionist greeted him with a polite but detached smile. He gave his name, filled out the usual forms, and then sat down in the waiting area. The chairs were hard and uncomfortable. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than the quiet conversations around him as he waited. He watched other patients come and go. Some were old, moving slowly with canes or walkers. Others were parents holding children who squirmed and giggled. Each one seemed to belong, and he felt the familiar pang of loneliness. He gripped the edge of the chair, trying to distract himself from the gnawing emptiness in his chest. The waiting room felt like a small microcosm of the world, and in it, he was just another shadow, another unnoticed figure. Finally, his name was called. He followed the nurse down a narrow hallway, the walls painted a calming shade of pale blue. She led him into an examination room and asked him to sit on the table. The paper cover crinkled under him as he positioned himself. He noticed the faint smell of antiseptic, the gleaming instruments neatly arranged on a counter, and the clock on the wall, ticking steadily. It all felt cold and clinical, a world of order and precision far removed from the warmth he craved. The door opened and the doctor entered. At first glance, the doctor seemed distant and stern, moving with brisk efficiency. There was no warmth in the greeting, no casual smile. Just a simple good morning that felt more like a formality than a welcome. The first few moments of the appointment reinforced his sense of isolation. The doctor asked standard questions about symptoms, but there was a precision, almost a detachment, in the way they spoke. It made him feel small, like a patient on a checklist rather than a person with feelings and fears. He explained his symptoms, his voice quiet and hesitant. He noticed the doctor's eyes briefly flick toward him, assessing, calculating, but never lingering in a way that felt comforting. Each word felt measured and clinical, and he instinctively kept his own words short. Afraid of overstepping the invisible boundary, the doctor seemed to maintain. It was the way he expected people to treat him, with distance, with polite indifference. It was easier that way, to not hope for anything more. The doctor listened carefully, took notes, and asked a few more questions, all in the same precise tone. They examined him with skill and efficiency, checking temperature, pulse, and lungs. The room felt colder as the minutes passed, the sterile air pressing down. He noticed that the doctor did not make small talk, did not ask about his life, his feelings, or how he was coping with the holidays. It was the way he expected the world to be, and yet, despite his disappointment, he found himself oddly relieved. There was no judgment, no probing, just a focus on facts and symptoms. But then, there were small moments, almost imperceptible, that hinted at something beneath the surface. When he mentioned being tired, the doctor paused, pen hovering over the paper. They asked more detailed questions about his sleep and appetite, their voice softening slightly. When he coughed, the doctor looked concerned, adjusting their tone and asking gently if he had eaten properly or taken care of himself. It was subtle, almost easily missed, but it was there, a glimmer of care hidden behind the professional distance. He found himself relaxing just a little, letting down his walls, though only slightly. He answered the questions more fully, explaining how he had been feeling since the previous year. The stress and isolation, the worry that his health was declining. The doctor listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, and he realized that despite the cold exterior, there was a person who was paying attention, who was noticing things others often ignored. After a thorough examination, the doctor spoke again. They explained his condition, possible treatments, and offered advice on how to take care of himself over the coming days. Their words were careful, measured, but underneath the professional tone, there was a quiet concern. They asked if he had someone to check on him at home, if he could manage meals and medicine, and he had to admit that he was mostly on his own. There was a brief pause, a hesitation, as if the doctor was considering something beyond their usual professional boundaries. He left the clinic with a prescription in hand and a few pieces of advice. Outside, the cold wind bit at him again, but something inside felt different. The world still seemed lonely. The streets still busy with happy faces, but he carried a small, quiet sense that someone had noticed him, that someone had acknowledged his struggles, even if in a subtle, almost invisible way. It was not the warmth of a friend or family, but it was a start. A small seed planted in the frozen soil of his loneliness. On the walk home, he thought about the appointment, about the doctor's careful questions and subtle concern. It was strange to realize that he had felt seen, even in the smallest way, by someone who had seemed so cold at first. He wondered why it mattered so much, why a simple acknowledgement could make such a difference. Maybe it was because he had spent so long feeling invisible, that even a flicker of attention felt like a lifeline. He stopped by a small corner store to pick up groceries. The warmth of the shop was comforting, and the clerk offered a friendly smile. It was ordinary, everyday kindness, but after the morning's experience, it felt more significant. He chose simple meals for the next few days, thinking about how he would care for himself, following the doctor's advice. It was a small act, but it was also a recognition that he mattered, that he was worthy of care. Returning to his apartment, he unpacked the groceries and prepared a simple meal. The act of cooking, of making something to nourish himself, felt oddly comforting. He ate slowly, savoring the warmth of the food and the quiet of his apartment. The small tree in the corner blinked softly, a reminder of the holiday he had feared. Yet the fear seemed slightly less oppressive now. The day had begun with heaviness, with the weight of illness and loneliness. But it ended with a small spark, the recognition that someone, somewhere, had cared enough to see him as night fell. He reflected on the day. The city outside was alive with lights and laughter, but inside, he felt a quiet sense of presence. The cold doctor had, in their own subtle way, become a part of his Christmas. A reminder that even in unexpected places there could be connection. He did not know what the coming days would bring, but he felt the faintest stirrings of hope, a belief that perhaps he would not be completely alone this year. He prepared for bed, placing the lights on the tree carefully, watching them blink in the darkness. He thought about the doctor's careful questions, the slight concern hidden in the professional tone, and he allowed himself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, the world still held people who noticed. Who cared? Who could become a kind of family in the most unexpected ways? With that thought, he drifted off to sleep, carrying a small, fragile hope into the night. The next morning, he woke feeling slightly better, though his body still felt weak. The memory of the doctor's quiet concern lingered in his mind, like a soft light breaking through the heavy clouds of loneliness. He got up slowly, moving carefully so as not to worsen the ache in his chest. The apartment was quiet, the blinking lights on the small tree casting faint shadows across the room. For the first time in days, he felt a gentle stir of something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He made himself a small breakfast, taking his time, trying to enjoy the simple act of eating without rush. The food tasted good, and the warmth from the cup in his hand spread through him. He thought about the previous day, about the small moments of care from the doctor. It was strange to feel noticed, to feel as though someone outside his own mind had acknowledged his struggle. The thoughts stayed with him, comforting and unsettling at the same time. After breakfast, he decided to take a short walk to clear his mind. The city streets were bustling with people, each busy with last-minute shopping, errands, or simply enjoying the festive season. He observed them quietly, feeling both a sense of longing and detachment. It was hard to reconcile the cheerfulness around him with the emptiness he carried inside. He walked slowly, noticing the lights strung across the streets, the wreaths hanging on doors, and the faint smell of baked goods wafting through the air. He passed a small park and noticed a few children playing in the snow. Their laughter was light and contagious, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to smile. He remembered his own childhood, the joy of simple winter games, the excitement of Christmas mornings, and the warmth of family gatherings. The memories were bittersweet, reminding him of what he had lost, but also offering a glimpse of something worth hoping for again as he returned home. He noticed a message on his phone from the clinic. It was a simple follow-up, checking if he had taken his medication and if he was feeling any better. He paused, surprised by the thoughtfulness. Most places only cared about the next appointment or the payment. This message was different. It was brief but personal, a sign that someone genuinely remembered him. He felt a small smile tug at his lips, a warmth spreading in his chest that he had not felt in a long time. The rest of the day passed quietly. He followed the doctor's advice carefully, drinking warm tea, resting when he needed, and keeping track of his symptoms. The act of caring for himself felt strange but empowering. He realized that he had been neglecting not only his health, but also the quiet parts of his life that brought comfort. The small tree in the corner, the soft blanket on the couch, the books he had once loved, they were all there, waiting for him to notice them again. Later, as he prepared a simple dinner, he thought about the doctor's words. The concern had been subtle, but it was real. He remembered the way the doctor had asked about his meals, his sleep, and even the quiet question about whether he had someone to check on him. Those small questions had pierced the wall of his isolation, hinting at a care that went beyond mere duty. It was the first time in months he had felt truly seen. After dinner, he decided to write a small note of thanks. He typed it carefully, unsure if it would reach the doctor personally, but feeling the need to express his gratitude. He wrote about how he had felt lonely and unnoticed, and how the small acts of care and attention had made a difference. Writing the note was like releasing a small weight from his chest, a quiet acknowledgement of the impact someone could have simply by noticing another human being. That evening, he returned to the couch, the room bathed in the soft glow of the tree lights. He thought about the coming days and the holiday ahead. The fear of loneliness still lingered, but it was accompanied by a cautious optimism. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider that this Christmas might not be entirely empty. There could be moments of connection, even if they came from unexpected places. Sleep came slowly that night. His mind wandered through memories and possibilities, dwelling on the small kindnesses that had touched him. He thought about the doctor, the way they had listened, the subtle concern in their voice, and the quiet acknowledgement of his struggles. It was an unfamiliar feeling, being seen by someone outside his own circle, someone he had only just met, yet it felt profoundly comforting. The next morning, he awoke to a light snowfall outside. The city seemed softer, quieter, almost magical in the way the snow muffled the usual sounds of traffic and footsteps. He dressed carefully, bundling himself against the cold, and decided to take another short walk. This time he noticed the details he had overlooked before, the way the light reflected off the snow. The footprints left by early morning walkers, the faint smoke rising from chimneys. Each detail felt alive, part of a world that was still moving forward, even as he had felt stuck in his own sorrow as he walked. He thought about reaching out to the clinic with the note he had written. It felt awkward, almost vulnerable, but he knew it was important. The small act of connection, of expressing gratitude, was a step toward breaking the isolation he had carried for so long. He pictured the doctor receiving it, perhaps noticing his words, and he allowed himself a quiet hope that the message would matter, that it would be received with the same care with which it was written. Returning home, he placed the note carefully in an envelope, addressing it to the clinic. He walked to the mailbox with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Feeling the significance of a small act in a world that often seemed indifferent, dropping the note into the slot, he felt a slight sense of relief, a recognition that he had reached beyond his solitude and made a connection, however small. The afternoon passed with quiet reflection. He read a book he had left unfinished, sipped warm tea, and watched the snow fall gently outside the window. The city, so alive and bustling, now seemed less intimidating, less alien. He realized that moments of care, even small and unexpected, could make a difference. The world was still harsh, still lonely at times, but it also held spaces where human connection could blossom. As evening approached, he thought again about the upcoming holiday. The fear that had once felt overwhelming now seemed less so. There was still uncertainty, still the possibility of disappointment, but it was accompanied by the awareness that kindness and care could appear in unexpected ways. The doctor, who had seemed so cold and distant, had become a symbol of that possibility. The thought brought a quiet comfort, a sense that even in a season he had feared, there could be moments of warmth and recognition. He prepared a small meal and ate slowly, savoring the flavors and the simple act of nourishing himself. Afterward, he sat by the tree, watching the lights blink in the darkness. He thought about the kindness he had received, the small attention that had reminded him of his own worth. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine a Christmas that was not entirely lonely, a possibility that he might experience connection, understanding, and even joy in the days to come. That night, as he lay in bed, he reflected on the subtle shifts in his world. The loneliness was still present, but it was softened by the quiet gestures that had touched him. The doctor's concern, the clinic's follow-up message, the act of writing and sending his note, each one was a thread connecting him back to the world. He realized that sometimes human connection came not in grand gestures, but in small, almost invisible acts of care. And in that realization, he found a fragile, but genuine, sense of hope. The following morning, he woke to a pale light spilling through the blinds. The ache in his chest had eased, though he still felt weak and fragile. He moved slowly, savoring the small comforts of his apartment. The blinking lights on the small tree in the corner cast soft shadows across the walls, and the quiet of the morning felt less oppressive than it had in days past. The sense of loneliness still lingered, but it was now mixed with a faint anticipation, a hope that this Christmas might unfold differently. After a light breakfast, he decided to take another short walk. The snow had thickened overnight, covering the streets and sidewalks in a pristine white layer. Each step he took made a crisp, satisfying crunch under his boots. The city seemed quieter, the usual noise muffled by the snow, and he felt a small sense of peace. The cold air stung his cheeks, but it also woke him up, reminded him that he was alive, that he could still feel, and that the world, despite its indifference, still existed outside his own walls. He paused at a small cafe he often passed on his walks. The warmth inside, the smell of coffee and baked goods, and the soft murmur of conversations drew him in. He found a corner seat and ordered a simple drink, watching the world move past the windows. Couples walked hand in hand. Friends laughed as they carried bags of gifts. Children tugged at parents' sleeves, pointing at the lights and decorations. He observed quietly, feeling the familiar mix of longing and isolation. But now it was tempered by a small, growing sense of hope. His thoughts drifted back to the doctor, to the quiet concern and subtle warmth that had started to break through the cold exterior. He realized that in a very short time, someone who had seemed distant had managed to touch his life in a meaningful way. It was strange, almost disorienting, to feel recognized and valued by someone he had only just met. He thought about the simple gestures, the careful questions, the attentive listening, the follow-up message, and how they had started to erode the walls he had built around himself. The next day, he received a phone call from the clinic. It was the doctor themselves asking how he was feeling and if he needed any additional help with meals or medication. He hesitated at first, surprised by the personal attention, but then he found himself answering honestly. He spoke about his lingering fatigue, his concerns about being alone during the holidays, and the subtle fear that no one would check on him if he became ill. The doctor listened patiently, their voice calm and reassuring. They offered advice and even suggested some small adjustments to his daily routine to make the days more manageable. Over the next few days, the connection deepened in small, meaningful ways. The doctor would ask questions about how he was spending his days, what he had eaten, if he had left the apartment for fresh air. Each question, though seemingly minor, carried a weight of genuine care. He began to look forward to these interactions, a small sense of being noticed and remembered, providing a comfort he had not felt in months. It was not a friendship in the traditional sense, but it was a bond, a bridge that began to pull him out of his isolation. One evening, as he rested on the couch after a simple meal, there was a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find a small package left on his doorstep. Inside was a basket with some homemade cookies, a note wishing him well for the holidays, and a small handwritten message from the doctor encouraging him to take care of himself. The gesture caught him off guard, filling him with a warmth that was almost overwhelming. The thoughtfulness, the attention to detail, the recognition of his loneliness, it all felt like someone had reached across the distance and offered him a kind of family, a presence that had been missing from his life. He placed the basket carefully on the table and read the note again, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. The act was simple, but it spoke volumes. He realized that human connection could take many forms, and sometimes it came from the most unexpected places. The doctor, who had seemed so cold at first, had become a lifeline, a quiet anchor in a world that often felt harsh and unfeeling. Encouraged by this gesture, he decided to do something for himself. He tidied the apartment, adding a few more decorations to the small tree, lighting a few candles, and preparing a small space where he could feel comforted. The act of caring for his environment felt symbolic, recognition that he could create warmth and connection even when the world outside seemed indifferent. Each detail, the placement of a candle, the choice of a festive mug for his tea, the careful arrangement of cookies on a plate became a way to honor the kindness he had received and to nurture himself. That night, he sat by the tree, sipping hot tea and watching the lights blink softly. The snow outside reflected the glow, creating a peaceful cocoon around his apartment. He thought about the coming days, about the holiday itself, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine joy, not the overwhelming, perfect joy often portrayed in stories, but a gentle, quiet joy that came from being seen, cared for, and acknowledged. The days that followed were filled with small, meaningful moments. The doctor continued to check in, offering advice and gentle encouragement. He began to venture out more, taking short walks, observing the city, and noticing the small details that had been invisible to him before. He smiled at children building snowmen, paused to watch carolers singing in the streets, and allowed himself to feel the fleeting warmth of human connection in everyday interactions. Each small moment added up, creating a patchwork of comfort and hope. One afternoon, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was the doctor in person, stopping by to see how he was doing and to offer some additional supplies for his meals. He felt a mixture of surprise and gratitude, unsure how to respond at first. The doctor's presence was calm and professional, but there was a subtle warmth in their eyes and voice that made the visit feel personal. They chatted briefly, offering practical advice and encouragement, and then left, leaving behind a sense of care that lingered long after the door closed. He spent the rest of the evening reflecting on the visit. The doctor's willingness to step beyond the expected boundaries of their role had a profound impact. It was not just about the practical help, but about the acknowledgement of his existence, the recognition that he mattered. He realized that family, in its truest sense, did not always come from blood or long shared history. Sometimes, it came from those who showed up, who cared, who offered presence and attention in ways that touched the heart. As Christmas Eve approached, he prepared a small meal for himself, setting the table carefully, lighting candles, and arranging the cookies from the basket. The apartment, once quiet and empty, now felt alive with light, warmth, and a sense of expectation. He thought about the doctor, about the small acts of care that had transformed his experience of the season, and he allowed himself to feel gratitude. The loneliness that had seemed insurmountable a few days ago had softened, replaced by a sense of connection that was fragile but real. He sat by the tree that night, reflecting on the journey of the past week. The cold and different world outside still existed, but within the walls of his apartment, he felt a presence, a sense of family that had arrived in the most unexpected form. The doctor, through small gestures and quiet attention, had become a symbol of hope and kindness. He realized that sometimes the people who touch our lives the most are not those we expect, but those who arrive with empathy, patience, and a willingness to care. As he prepared for bed, he felt a deep sense of peace. The Christmas he had feared, the holiday that he thought would break him with loneliness, had become a season of quiet connection. He knew there were still uncertainties ahead, still moments of doubt and fear. But he had discovered that even in the darkest moments, human kindness could reach across the distance and offer warmth, recognition, and family. And with that thought, he closed his eyes, carrying a fragile but real hope into the night. Ready to greet the holiday with an open heart, Christmas morning arrived softly. With the city covered in a thin blanket of snow, the streets glistened under the gentle sunlight, and the world seemed quieter than usual, as if it had paused to honor the day. He woke slowly, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. After the days of small, comforting gestures and subtle connections, he wondered what the day would bring. The sense of loneliness that had haunted him for so long was still there, but it was now tempered by the warmth he had begun to feel from unexpected places. He started the day with a small breakfast, the aroma of fresh toast and coffee filling the apartment. The lights on the tree blinked softly, reflecting off the snow outside, and for the first time, he felt a sense of anticipation rather than dread. He thought about the doctor, about the care and attention that had been extended to him over the past days, and he allowed himself a moment of gratitude. The thought of someone noticing him, checking in on him, and offering kindness during the holiday was almost overwhelming. It was the first Christmas in years that felt like it could be special. As he sat by the window, sipping his coffee, there was a gentle knock at the door. He opened it to find a small delivery, a package of simple gifts, some handmade treats, and a note from the doctor wishing him a Merry Christmas. His heart swelled with a mixture of surprise, joy, and deep emotion. The note was carefully written, expressing hope that he would feel cared for and reminding him that he was not alone. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Touched by the thoughtfulness and the human connection that had grown so unexpectedly, he set the package aside and took a moment to breathe, letting the warmth of the gesture sink in. The snow outside continued to fall lightly, and the quiet of the morning made the apartment feel like a safe haven. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to truly enjoy the moment, to feel the small but significant presence of someone who cared. It was not the grandeur of holiday celebrations, nor the noise of crowded parties, but it was real, tangible, and deeply comforting. Throughout the day, he followed a simple routine, taking care of himself, preparing a modest meal, and keeping the apartment tidy. The act of caring for his space and himself felt empowering. Each movement, each small task, became an expression of self-respect and recognition that he deserved to be nurtured. The tree lights flickered gently, the soft glow reflecting in the snow outside, creating a peaceful atmosphere. It was a quiet Christmas, but one filled with meaning and reflection. Around midday, he received a call from the doctor, checking in to see how he was spending the holiday. The conversation was brief, warm, and encouraging. The doctor asked about the breakfast, whether he had plans for the afternoon, and if he felt comfortable. He shared a little about his morning, his gratitude for the small gifts, and the surprise of feeling connected in a way he had not anticipated. The doctor's tone was gentle, their presence through the phone comforting and grounding. The conversation left him feeling lighter, more seen, and more connected to the world outside his apartment. In the afternoon, he decided to take a short walk, venturing into the quiet streets blanketed in snow. The city was calm, with only a few passers-by bundled up against the cold. He observed children playing, couples strolling hand in hand, and neighbors greeting each other. The festive decorations sparkled, and the air carried a crispness that invigorated him. He noticed the subtle details he had missed before, the way snowflakes caught the sunlight, the sound of distant laughter, the soft rustle of branches under the snow. Each moment felt alive, each detail a reminder that the world was full of life. Even when he had felt disconnected, returning home, he prepared a simple Christmas dinner. Carefully arranging the small meal on the table, he placed the cookies from the package alongside the meal and set a candle flickering in the center. Sitting down, he took a moment to appreciate the scene, the small tree with its blinking lights, the soft glow of the candle, the quiet of the snow outside, and the small acts of kindness that had led him to this point. The loneliness that had once seemed so overwhelming was softened, replaced by a gentle sense of presence and care. As the evening approached, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was the doctor in person. He hesitated for a moment, surprised and uncertain, but opened the door. The doctor smiled gently, carrying a small basket of additional treats and a warm drink. They spent a little time together, talking quietly, sharing laughter, and enjoying the simple comfort of human presence. It was not a formal visit, nor a professional obligation. It was a gesture of genuine care and connection. The warmth he felt was unlike anything he had experienced in recent years. They spoke about life, about challenges and small joys, about the little things that made the season meaningful. The conversation flowed naturally, with an ease that felt unfamiliar yet comforting. For the first time, he felt that he could share openly without judgment, that he could be seen as a whole person, not just someone to care for in a clinical sense. The doctor's attention and empathy filled a space in him that had been empty for too long. After the doctor left, he sat by the tree once more, reflecting on the day. He thought about the journey from the loneliness and despair he had felt just a week ago, to the quiet joy and connection of this Christmas. The small gestures, the careful attention, the moments of shared humanity had transformed the holiday into something meaningful. He realized that family did not always have to be defined by blood or tradition. Sometimes it could be formed by those who showed up, who cared, and who offered kindness when it was needed most. He allowed himself to feel gratitude, a deep and sincere acknowledgement of the ways his life had been touched by another. The warmth was not grand or extravagant, but it was real and lasting. He thought about the doctor, about the quiet ways they had become a part of his life. and he felt a connection that went beyond the boundaries of a typical patient and caregiver relationship. It was the essence of family: attention, presence, care, and a willingness to bridge loneliness with compassion. As night fell, prepared for bed, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had not known in years. The apartment was cozy, the tree lights twinkling, and the snow outside casting a soft glow over the city. He thought about the people who had made a difference, about the small acts that had transformed his experience of the holiday, and about the possibility of carrying this sense of connection into the future. The day had been simple, yet profound, a reminder that hope and warmth could appear in the most unexpected places. Lying in bed, he reflected on the journey of the past days. He had gone from believing that Christmas would break him, that it would be a time of emptiness and despair, to realizing that even in isolation, human connection could be found. The doctor's care, the thoughtful gestures, and the gentle presence had reminded him that he was not invisible, that he mattered, and that family could be found in unexpected ways. He allowed himself to drift into sleep with a sense of peace, a heart softened by kindness, and a hope renewed for the days to come. This Christmas, once feared and dreaded, had become a season of warmth, connection, and the quiet miracle of being seen and valued. The morning after Christmas dawned quietly. With a soft gray light filtering through the blinds, the apartment felt warm and alive, a stark contrast to the loneliness he had felt just days before. He woke slowly, feeling a lingering sense of calm and contentment from the events of the previous day. The tree still blinked gently, and the faint smell of cookies from the doctor's gift basket lingered in the air. For the first time in a long while, he felt that the world was not entirely cold and indifferent, that there could be light even in the most unexpected places. He began the day with a simple breakfast. The act of preparing food feeling comforting and grounding. Each movement, from boiling water to slicing bread, was done with care. A quiet ritual that reminded him he could nurture himself. The snow outside softened the edges of the city, turning familiar streets into a quiet, reflective landscape. He took a moment to look out the window, noticing the way sunlight caught on the snowflakes, sparkling like tiny diamonds. It was a small moment of beauty, but it filled him with a sense of wonder and peace. After breakfast, he decided to take a longer walk than he had in the past week. The snow crunched under his boots as he wandered through streets that seemed almost magical in their stillness. Families were out for walks, neighbors greeted each other with smiles, and children's laughter echoed in the crisp air. He paused occasionally, taking in the sounds and sights, feeling the simple joy of being present in the world. The quiet joy of small moments, of noticing life moving around him, was a new sensation, one that he had almost forgotten. He thought about the doctor as he walked, about the quiet care and attention that had transformed his Christmas, the doctor's subtle gestures, the check-in calls, the small gifts, as the genuine concern had shown him that human connection could exist in unexpected forms. It was not just professional duty. It was empathy, presence, and kindness. He realized that the doctor had become more than a caregiver. They had become a part of his life, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that family could be chosen and formed in unique ways. As he wandered through the park, he noticed a group of people clearing snow from benches and pathways. They smiled and waved as he passed, small gestures of friendliness that felt significant. He stopped to watch children building snowmen, the simple joy of their activity making him smile. He felt a connection to the world in a way he had not felt for years. The loneliness that had weighed so heavily on him was still present, but it had softened, replaced by a sense of belonging, even if it was small and fragile. Returning home, he decided to write a journal entry about the past week. He recounted the moments that had mattered, the gestures of care that had touched him, and the quiet hope that had begun to grow. Writing allowed him to process the feelings that were both new and overwhelming. He realized that acknowledging these emotions was a way of honoring the kindness he had received and nurturing the connection that had begun to form. As he wrote, he heard a soft knock at the door. Opening it, he found the doctor standing there, carrying a small basket of warm bread and a note wishing him continued health and happiness. The doctor smiled gently, their presence calm and reassuring. They stepped inside for a brief visit, chatting about everyday matters, sharing small stories, and offering advice for maintaining his health and well-being. The visit was casual, yet it carried a depth of care that left him feeling genuinely supported. They spoke about the importance of small routines, of noticing the little moments of beauty and connection in life. The doctor encouraged him to take walks, to enjoy the quiet of the city, and to allow himself to feel joy in unexpected places. Their words were simple but profound, and he listened intently, absorbing the guidance and the warmth that accompanied it. It was a reminder that human connection often comes through the smallest, most thoughtful actions. After the doctor left, he spent the afternoon preparing a small, celebratory meal for himself. He set the table carefully, placing candles and arranging the dishes in a way that felt special. The act of creating a meaningful experience for himself, even in solitude, was empowering. He realized that self-care and self-recognition were forms of connection too, ways of honoring the life and presence he had almost forgotten to value as evening approached. He wrapped himself in a blanket and sat by the tree, sipping warm tea. The snow outside had stopped, leaving a quiet, reflective city. He allowed himself to reflect on the journey of the past days, the loneliness that had once felt unbearable, the subtle gestures of care that had begun to break through, and the unexpected sense of family that had emerged through the doctor's attention. He felt gratitude not just for the gestures themselves, but for the realization that human kindness could be transformative. Even in small, quiet ways, he thought about the future, about the possibility of maintaining this connection and carrying the sense of hope forward. The holidays had shown him that even when loneliness seemed certain, there could be unexpected warmth, compassion, and recognition. The doctor had become more than a caregiver. They had become a reminder of the potential for human connection, a living example of how small actions could create profound change in someone's life. As night fell, he prepared for bed, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. The apartment was peaceful, the tree lights casting soft shadows, and the memory of the day's small joys lingering in his mind. He thought about the journey from despair to hope, from isolation to connection, and he allowed himself to feel content. The loneliness of past years had been softened, not erased, but transformed into an awareness that he was seen, cared for, and valued. Lying in bed, he reflected on the past week's events, on the subtle yet powerful ways that human connection had entered his life. The doctor's care, the small gifts, the attentive gestures, and the simple presence had created a sense of family and belonging that he had thought impossible. He realized that life could be fragile, that loneliness could be intense, but that even the smallest acts of kindness could create lasting impact. With the snow-covered city outside and the warm glow of the apartment around him, he drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. His heart carried the quiet hope and gentle joy that had been nurtured over the past days, a sense that the world, despite its indifference at times, still held moments of beauty, connection, and care. The Christmas season, once feared and dreaded, had opened a door to something lasting and meaningful, the recognition that family, kindness, and warmth could be found in unexpected places, and that hope could grow quietly, persistently, and powerfully within the human heart.